All right, let's talk about something that connects the food on your plate all the way up to national policy. It all comes down to one core economic idea: producer surplus. Today, we're going to break down what that really means when we talk about the journey of food from the farm to the market.
So let's get right into it. Picture this. A farmer grows 10 kilograms of rice. What happens next? I mean, it sounds simple, right? But what happens to that rice? Well, that's where things get really, really interesting from an economic standpoint.
Okay, so let's define our main term here: producer surplus. Now, you might have heard this term in an econ class, and usually it's about profit. But for our purposes today, we're using it in a much more practical way. We're talking about the amount of food that actually leaves the farm to feed everybody else.
So, to put it simply, producer surplus is just the amount of stuff a farmer grows that gets made available to the rest of us, the non-farmers. It doesn't matter if it's sold at a local market, to a huge distributor, or wherever. This is the food that actually gets out there into the broader economy. But, and this is where it gets a little more complex, it's not just one type of surplus. Nope. What our farmer decides to do with those 10 kilos of rice actually creates two totally different kinds of surplus. So, first up is something called marketable surplus. And the keyword to remember here is potential. Think of it this way. It's the amount of the crop a farmer could sell, but only after they've set aside what they need for themselves and their farm. And the math here is super simple, right? You just take the total amount they grew and subtract whatever they're keeping for themselves, what we call self-use. And voila, what's left over? That's the marketable surplus. That's the stuff that could be sold. So let's jump back to our farmer with the rice. They grew 10 kilos. They decide, okay, I need 4 kilos for my own use. You do the quick math, 10 minus 4, and you get 6 kilograms. That 6 kilos is their marketable surplus. That's the potential supply. But what does self-use actually mean? I mean, what's in that 4 kilos they're keeping? Well, it's not just food for their family. It could be seeds they need to save for the next planting season, or it could be feed for their animals. It could even be used as a kind of payment, trading some of that rice for other goods or services instead of using cash. Okay, that was marketable. Now for the second type, marketed surplus. And if the keyword for the first one was potential, the keyword here is actual. This isn't about what a farmer could sell, it's about what they actually sell. And this is a great way to see the difference side by side. On one hand, you've got marketable surplus. That's the potential supply, right? The amount that's available to be sold. But on the other hand, you have marketed surplus. That's the actual supply, the amount that really truly gets sold in the market. And sometimes these two numbers can be very, very different.
So you might be asking, why would a farmer sell everything, even the stuff they need for themselves? Well, the tough reality for a lot of small farmers is just pure economic pressure. Maybe they're in debt, they've taken out loans, so they might be forced to sell their entire harvest, all 10 kilos of that rice, just to pay back what they owe. In that case, their marketed surplus is their total production.
And this leads us to a really, really key point. You hear about total production numbers all the time, right? But honestly, understanding the surplus is way more important if you want to understand the real economy. This is the number that truly, truly matters.
So let me just ask you directly, what do you think is more important? How much a farmer grows in total, or how much they actually end up selling?
It's the surplus, for sure. I mean, think about it. It doesn't really matter if a country grows 1 million tons of wheat if none of it actually gets to the market, right? The surplus, what's actually sold, is the number that reveals the true market supply. It's what's really available for the rest of us. And that one number, the true market supply, has these huge ripple effects. It has massive implications. In fact, it's what directly shapes government policy. It connects a decision made by a single farmer all the way up to the economic strategy for an entire country.
I mean, governments use this data for some of their biggest decisions. It's how they figure out things like the minimum support price to make sure farmers don't lose their shirts. It helps them decide if the country needs to import more food or if there's enough to export. And it even helps plan for all the logistics like storage and transportation. The whole food supply chain really is built on knowing this number. So that leaves us with one final thought to chew on. We've seen how a farmer's choice about their surplus can shape national policy. But what about the other way around? How do you think those policies, things like price guarantees or trade rules, then influence that farmer's original decision on how much to sell? It's this powerful feedback loop, this economic cycle. Something to think about. Thanks for joining me for this.